We ask the question, what is needed in the world? Is that going to be?
From the Middle East to the streets of London, and in America's cities, a discontent with the status quo. Whether it's with the iron grip of entrenched governments or with a widening economic divide between the rich and those struggling to get by. But where are those so hungry for change heading? How profound is their long-term vision to transform society?
The system has lost its self-evidence, its automatic legitimacy, and now the field is open.
The concerns of Slovenian-born philosopher Slavoj Žižek, whose critical examination of both capitalism and socialism has made him an internationally recognized intellectual, popular among the Wall Street occupiers here in New York, for example. Talk to Al Jazeera sat down with Slavoj Žižek, and we began by asking him about the violent riots this summer in London and whether the protesters there had a political agenda.
The way the protests looked, the way they acted there, repeatedly, I spoke with participants there, with people who saw it, they say, no, there on the streets, there were no demands. They are not even able to formulate a cause, which can be utopian communist, which can be religious, but just pure violence, and the only cause, or however you call it, agenda is imitate consumerism.
Well,
that's very sad.
Here in the United States, do you see any kind of a coherent ideological demand?
No, but I don't blame them. Listen, I am not a naive communist. I am the first to say this really made me many enemies. When I said, let's face it, 20th century communism was precisely because it started with such hopes and ended in a nightmare, was maybe the greatest catastrophe, ethical catastrophe, I'm almost tempted to say, in the history of humanity, more than fascism. You know why? Because let's be very simple. In fascism, we have bad guys who said, our program is to do this and these bad things, no? And what a surprise, they took power, they did bad things, no? In communism, you have authentic tragedy, which is why you have dissidents, you have always inner struggles. So, but nonetheless, it is over that. And what does this mean? This means that let's not bluff. We see the limitations of the existing system. I stand here at my basic position, which is when people say, oh, you are utopian. Sorry, the only true utopia for me is that things can go on indefinitely the way they are. With just some, the way it looked at the beginning of 2008 financial breakdown. Okay, our legislation concerning banks was not good enough. We changed that a little bit. Everything will be okay. No, it's not that. So something will have to be done. But let's face it openly. The tragedy is that I don't know, we don't know, what effective forum can replace capitalist democratic system the way we have it now. Now I will quote someone to whom I am, of course, totally opposed politically, but sometimes she is not stupid. Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged. Right. When in her ridiculous hymn to money, she says, money is, in a way, a means of liberty, in the sense of we have to divide things, exchange, and so on. She says, money means we can do it peacefully. I pay you, you sell it to me only if you want to. If not money, then there has to be some kind of direct domination, brutal extortion, whatever. I don't agree with her here, but doesn't she have here a point, in the sense that isn't a big experience of 20th century communism that they wanted to abolish market money and direct brutal domination, masterhood returned with vengeance.
Okay, but I've read some of what you've said, and what you've said is fascism of the left, if that's the means necessary, so be it, right? So what do you mean by fascism of the left?
This was to provoke my liberal friends who are up. I like to provoke. Like, there are much worse things that I've said. For example, I've said, and it gave almost a heart attack to some of my friends.
We don't take you literally, is that what you're saying?
No. Why not? Because, all the problem is the problem of violence. Of course I am opposed to violence, when by it we mean killing, torturing people, and so on. But for me, true violence, which I support, is not physical violence, but violence when you say, like the violence of Egyptian demonstrators on Tahrir Square. They were violent in the formal sense that they didn't just shoot and so on. They wanted the whole system to stop functioning. This is why my famous statement, which brought me so many enemies, is the first part is, the problem with Hitler was that he wasn't violent enough, but then the second part, in the sense in which Gandhi was more violent than Hitler. Hitler's all violence was to make the system work. Gandhi wanted to stop it. So this is, for me, the problem, this obsession with the violence, demonization of violence. Of course, it should be demonized violence, but before doing that, we should also see all the forms of violence. We should see violence which is invisible, not because I'm not a paranoiac, because some bad media controlled by I don't know whom prevent us seeing it. But just think, for example, you want to talk about violence? Talk about Republic of Congo today. Millions dying. The whole state doesn't function. Warlords dominate. You have drugged child warriors and so on. This is the violence which we don't notice too much because it's part of the system. So all I'm saying is let's expand our notion of violence. The same thing I wrote about in Guardian, the British daily newspaper, about West Bank. Okay, I unambiguously condemned violence of Palestinian or whichever terrorism there. But my point was, what happens there when nothing happens? Mm-hmm. By nothing happens,
nothing changes.
Nothing big for the media. No one is killed, blah, blah. This everyday suffocating bureaucratic occupation of Israel, poisoning wells, burning trees, slowly pushing Palestinians out. This is the reality. Without getting this background, you don't get the whole picture.
But you're not talking about any ideological solution to, for example, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, are you?
What do you mean by ideological solution?
Well, you're talking about when things don't change there, then it's regarded as the norm.
Yeah, and we should see violence in that normal state.
Right, but is there an ideological approach to responding to this rather than what looks to everyone else as a nationalistic or maybe a religious conflict?
The whole problem here is, what does the term ideology mean? For me, ideology is present more and more at the level of daily lives. We live in a very strange era where, at least in the West, people think they are outside ideology. Like, take average people today. What is the implicit injunction that you get from society, in education, whatever? It's not sacrifice yourself for a big cause. It's something like be true to yourself, have a full life, realize your potentials. It's a kind of what I call spiritualized hedonism. No? So people don't experience it as ideology, but I think we are in ideology. Precisely because ideology is, for me, the way you see things and you don't see things so that you can function in our daily lives. For example, the fact that we cannot imagine a change means ideology. Or to give you another example, did you notice how today problems of racism and sexism, which are very real problems, are automatically translated into problems of tolerance? This is ideology. Look at Martin Luther King. He never practically mentions tolerance. For him, the problem was not, oh, whites should more tolerate us blacks. The problem was what? Economic exploitation, legal rights, everyday racism, and so on. To perceive this problem as the problem of tolerance, you already accept a certain vision of society where, you know, there are almost naturalized cultural differences, and we should learn to tolerate each other, and so on and so on. Politics proper disappears here.
Do you see anywhere in the world where that concept of the left is actually trying to actuate that, actualize that?
Things are slowly happening. I mean, but our media are here not covering it enough. For example, I was surprised. Just take how the media cover India and China. China is the bad guy. Everybody knows bad communists and so on, terrorizing Tibet. But do you know that in India, from time to time you get a note, but it's not reported enough. You have a mega Maoist Naxalite rebellion. According to most of the estimates, we are talking about, okay, India is big, but nonetheless it's a number even for India. Over 1 million armed rebels. Horrible things are happening when Indian new capitalism is trying to expand into these tribal areas to get access to mines. And we simply don't see it. So there is a rebellion there. There are things happening now even in Europe. These things are very serious. It's not just the superficial things, or will Greece pay its debts or not. It's basically, to put it in one of possible ways. First, it is that Europe, I like to quote this metaphor, you know, Sigmund Freud, when he was old, asked this ridiculous, naive question, was will das Weib? What does a woman want? I claim, no, today it's the problem, what does Europe want? Europe cannot decide. On the one hand, we have this pure technocratic Brussels vision, we should just organize ourselves with regard to global market to be competitive. Then we have this nationalist anti-immigrant movements. It's very sad if this is the only alternative. I think that today the world is asking for a real alternative. Look, would you like, I wouldn't, to live in a world where the only alternative is either Anglo-Saxon neoliberalism or Chinese Singaporean, as we poetically call it, capitalism with Asian values, which means authoritarian capitalism, which is now turning even more effective than Western liberal capitalism. So something will have to be done, and that's the tragedy of Europe. That's the first one. The second one, I'm such a pessimist, unfortunately, in Europe, how Europe is regressing. Look, one incident. You know that European Union basically didn't want to allow in Turkey for not being democratic enough, whatever. Okay, maybe.
Or not being Islamic, or being too Islamic.
But let me tell you something. Did you notice this? This summer, there was in Istanbul a big gay parade. 10,000 of homosexuals demonstrating. No incidents. Try to do this in a post-communist East European country, which is part of European Union. There was recently in Split, the southern Croatian city, a gay parade. You know how it looked? 700 gays protected by 2,000 policemen, protecting them from 10,000 local people trying to lynch them, and so on. I mean, so I am saying, to provoke my friends, another of my provocations, yes, I agree with right-wingers, European legacy, Judeo-Christian legacy is in danger. But they, the false protectors of Europe against Islam and so on, they are the danger. I don't fear Muslims in Europe. I fear protectors of Europe. And even my Jewish friends, I'm telling them, beware. Are you aware what is happening? Did you notice something about this Breivik, the guy who went on a shooting spree in Norway? You know, he is the clear case of something which is emerging now. Something paradoxical. And I mean it literally. anti-Semitic Zionist. On the one hand, he was clearly anti-Semitic. He says, in Western Europe, except England, it's okay, we don't have too many Jews, so we can manage it. He said, England, especially United States, too many Jews. So, this standard nation-state vision, Jews are okay if they are negligible, if too much, blah, blah. At the same time, he was absolutely pro-Israel, pro-Zionist. Now, you will say, this is a lone madman. Ha. I think this is the basic attitude of American conservative Christian fundamentalists. You remember that scandal at Fox News, Glenn Beck. He was fired for anti-Semitic remarks, but at the same time, he was absolutely pro-Zionist. And this, for me, is a nightmare. Are representatives of the State of Israel aware what they are doing? They basically sold their soul to the devil. By this, I mean this. They made a deal with those political forces in the West who are almost, I would say, by definition, anti-Semitic, telling them, you can play your racial games there, just allow us to do same with the Palestinians here. I really worry about Jews here. Jews are a great nation. The Zionist politics is turning them just into another narrow land-grabbing nation. The true victims of Middle East conflict, of this catastrophic politics, will be, in any case, I claim, Jews themselves. They will lose their uniqueness and greatness.
At what point do you think, or what point would you notice that there was some glimmer of real change, revolutionary change, anywhere in the world then? Because you're lamenting the fact that the left really hasn't got a global remedy or a global approach to dealing with a lot of these problems. No, where would you see the glimmers of some kind of a change there?
No, I think that already what is happening now is a reason for modest optimism. Don't expect miracles in the sense of all of a sudden there will be a magical solution. The beginning is simply that people should become aware that the difficulties we are confronting are not just the difficulties caused by bad, greedy guys in an otherwise good system, but that we have to ask certain questions about the system as such. And this awareness is raising. This is what all the protests here are about. And I think that at this stage, what is again important is not so much to offer fast solutions, but to break this, I call it ironically, Fukuyama taboo. Which means the idea, history, yeah. Okay, I mean, Fukuyama is not an idiot. Like, in a way, we all were, till now, Fukuyamaists. Even radical leftists were not thinking about what can replace capitalism or state. They were demanding, more social justice, more rights for women within the system. The time has come to raise this more fundamental question. The system has lost its self-evidence, its automatic legitimacy. And now the field is open. This is a very important achievement.
But the field is open. Who's going to fill that vacuum? Is it going to be somebody from above?
Danger here. I totally agree with you. Whenever let's not forget that we know very well who filled in the opening in 1930s in Europe and so on. No, this brings its own risks. But nonetheless, we have to take a chance. Why? Because we see it more and more through a series of phenomena like economic crisis becoming a kind of a permanent emergency state. Then, I think a phenomenon which we should be very attentive to, how even if worldwide economy is somehow progressing, but this is a nice paradox, Berlin Wall fell, but there are new walls, new divisions rising up everywhere within most of the states. You have stronger divisions, not just between simply rich and poor, but like in an exemplary way in Latin America, people there who live in favelas or slums elsewhere are not simply poor. It's something much more radical. They are simply excluded from public space, political engagement, and so on and so on. So, again, it's not a question of shall we take the risk or not. The opening is, in a way, imposed on us. That's my answer to those who tell me, why don't you just keep quiet and we silently go on the way it is? I claim if we do nothing, we will gradually approach kind of a new, it will not be old fascism, we have to be very specific here, but a new type of authoritarian society. Here I see the world historical importance of what is happening today in China. Till now, let's be frank, there was one good argument for capitalism. Sooner or later, it brought a demand for democracy. You can have dictatorship for 10, 20 years, South Korea, Chile, but what I'm afraid is that with this capitalism with Asian values, Singapore, China, we get a capitalism much more efficient, dynamic than, it looks so at least, than our Western capitalism, but I don't share the hope of my liberal friends, like give them 10 years, another Tiananmen Square demonstration. No. The marriage between capitalism and democracy is over.
Okay, so if China is not a good example or not very exemplary in the way you see this breaking open, is there anywhere else? Because you're talking about, your complaint is in all of these cases that consumerism is the driving force of the ambition and the discontent. Do you see any place where you can get beyond that?
Again, even in China, you have attempts to organize civil society in the sense of social movements like for ecology, for workers' rights, and so on. And I think that especially in China, for example, this may be even more important than some type of Western democracy. At low level, incredible things are happening in China. You know what can give you a hint of the explosive situation in China? Remember at the last session of their rubber stamp parliament, everyone expected they will redouble their defense budget. No, they redoubled the budget for internal security. China is now the only big country which spends more for internal security than for the army. So again, there are protests there. There are this Arab Spring. You know why I liked it so much? Because we in the West were, as we always are, but we are not worse than others. I'm getting a universal pessimist. Spontaneous racists, no? The cliché was, oh, with the Arabs, all you can get if you want to mobilize people is kind of a racist, anti-Semitic, nationalist, or religious fundamentalist movement. You cannot get a nice secular movement for democratic opening, where we got exactly that. Now comes the crucial part, what happens after? And this is the saddest thing. I pray it will not happen, but some signs do point out in this sad direction that maybe, I hope not, maybe the final outcome will be a kind of a perverse pact between Muslim Brotherhood and the army. To put it in very simplified terms, Muslim Brotherhood gets a much stronger ideological role controlling school, but the army gets in exchange what? It keeps all its privileges, corruption, and so on and so on. But nonetheless, again, things are happening. Or if you take it in Europe, people first thought, made fun of Greece. Oh, Greece, those lazy, primitive Mediterranean people. No, you have Spain, you have England. It will spread, I claim. And as you said, I agree, this is crucial. The battle now is not, will things go on or will there be a revolution? What we should do is fight the most difficult struggle for who will, to put it naively, who will appropriate this energy of protest. Look, even here in the United States, there is a great energy of protest, but till now it was appropriated by tea parties. Are we aware how, if you look at how they formulate that stuff, tea parties look like workers' protests 50 years ago, you know, if you listen to their songs, I listened to one pop singer who supports people. He said, we are ordinary working people, exploited, bad people in Washington, Wall Street exploit us, and so on and so on. Here it will be the struggle. And it's a tough struggle. I have no illusions. There are great dangers. But you know what the Chinese say when they really hate you? May you live in interesting times. We certainly are approaching interesting times.
Thank you very much for speaking with Al Jazeera.
My God, thank you.